Let's talk about account takeover protection. Now, this may seem something a little arcane, but actually it's a fairly common need for your identity provider, since it can spring up in the wild with just a little expansion of your identity surface. And it's an important feature for your auth provider to give you. So what's the use case that we're talking about here? Well, login doesn't always take place on one server. In fact, sometimes it doesn't even take place in one identity provider. Let's take an example from FusionAuth's history in the video game industry. Let's assume you have a game studio. You have multiple surfaces internally for your employees, custom tools, internet, company email, all these things. These all live under a high friction, high security provider, such as a workspace directory like Google Workspace or Azure AD. Access control for these systems is a manual process. Employees must use multi-factor authentication, and employees must re-authenticate every 24 hours. Now compare that to customer-facing authentication. In this example, let's assume this is a feedback and community forum for our gaming company. Users can join the forum and talk about the latest releases, report bugs, and connect with other users across the world. While authentication is necessary to prevent spam and allow users to own their own posts, in most cases, we want this to be incredibly low friction to get as many users in the door and returning as possible. So no MFA, an open registration process that's fully self-serve, and refresh tokens that keep the user logged in for, weeks at a time. While this surface is primarily for end users, our employees will also need access. They need to respond to users, post announcements, encourage engagement, and more. This opens up an attack vector. A person with malicious intent could find ways to impersonate our employees and sow misinformation, degrade our reputation, or even gain access to functionality like moderation tools. Now, if our employees just register like the average forum user, we negate all of the amazing security we have around our employee accounts. Sure, our internal tools are safe, but this external tool is only as secure as a simple username and password. This allows for potential account takeover. This is a completely unnecessary risk. So how do we prevent this? Well, in our case, we'll use an external identity provider or an IDP by setting that up through our FusionAuth instance that provides authentication for our forum. Let's take a look at what that looks like in reality. So here we are in our FusionAuth dashboard. I run this locally just to make it a little bit easier to follow. We're going to go from the dashboard into our settings and go down to identity providers. You can see here that right now we don't have any identity providers. So we're going to add one. We're going to go to the top right, and from the dropdown, we are going to select Add OpenID Connect. As you can see, you can choose from any number of different identity providers, including using a custom one with SAML, OpenID Connect, or even things like Google Workspace. From here, we just need to put in a little bit of information, such as the name, a client ID that we can get from our OIDC provider, client secret from that same provider. And then instead of going through all the different endpoints, we will discover the endpoints by putting in an issuer URL. In this case, I have one at my local host on a different port. Almost done. We're going to scroll to the bottom, and then we need to enable it for whatever applications we want. In this case, I want it for the Form app, and I do want to allow for the creation of registration. This will allow for our employee users to create themselves. Now, if you wanted to keep this fully secure, you could obviously remove the create registration and make this a manual process as well. Again, it's all about friction versus simplicity. Finally, save that in. We now have a new employee login area. Now we can also modify how this will view when logging in. So instead of a button text of login with OpenID Connect, we can say employee login, and that will display on the button when the employees go to log in. You can see here I have Iron Pixel Studios, a lovely fake gaming company, and when I go to sign in, and as you can see when we go to log in, we have login and password, or we have employee login. This also exists on the create account route as well, allowing your employees not just to log in, but also register via their employee login credentials. On top of that, by default, the system will know and connect based on the email address that the employee uses. This locks that email address out of the system and ensures employees keep the proper login method and prevents any additional attempts to register with that employee email. We can even go one step further. Let's make sure that the standard email password registration is prevented for all emails ending with our employee email domain. That way, new employees don't have to register for the forum right away and they get all this protection. To deal with blocked domain settings, we're going to go from our dashboard into our tenants, and we're going to select whichever tenant we want to block these in. In this case, we just have the default. Going over to security, we can scroll down and we can access our blocked domain settings. So in this case, we'll make it the employeeemail.com domain, allowing the employee-email.com emails not to be registered anymore. Now, with these two relatively simple processes, we've drastically lowered the risk of account takeovers. Whenever possible, we want to make it easy for our employees to make the right security decisions. In this case, giving them a quick way of registering for the forum that's also really the most secure direction for them, that's the way to go. All of this is standard in FusionAuth's toolkit, and since FusionAuth believes that your authentication control should be complete, we also give you access to webhooks and JavaScript functions that fire during the runtime for many events, allowing you to have fine-grained workflows around the registration process. And on top of all of that, we offer the ability to implement verification gating to force users to verify their emails before they gain access. But that's a video for another time. If you already have a FusionAuth installation for your application, I suggest you give this functionality a try. If you don't, be sure to give FusionAuth a try by downloading, that's right, download your auth at fusionauth.io/download. If it fits your need, you can deploy it for free to your infrastructure to keep the auth party moving forward.